Hi, Jack.
Hey, long
Jack
time
is an
no
applicant
see.
attorney in San Diego, and I'll briefly talk about how we met. I had uncovered a massive fraud syndicate scheme that had originated out of and was born in San Diego. And I had started making a bunch of calls to attorney associations to see if maybe we could collaborate and, try to figure this out in hopes that there were some good applicant attorneys out there that we could maybe start getting the messaging out about these fraud schemes because at the time they were kind of operating in obscurity. They still kind of are. So I started making some phone calls around and got a hold of the president of one of the chapters of the Attorneys Association San Diego, and he invited me into one of your quarterly meetings. And I just was so surprised, really, about how wonderful you all are. You just really wanted
Yeah,
to.
we're human beings. We're a kind and loving people here in the applicant bar.
I do think I got yelled at a few times, definitely some personalities there, but I was really surprised at how really angry you guys were at the fraudster attorneys out there, and the cappers and I just hadn't realized that you guys that they were really damaging and being a blight on your reputation and your association. So I believe that's how we met, and then we started doing some collaboration, some public speaking, and I remember we did one of the big ones in Palm Springs. It was like 3,000 something attorneys there, and that was a really great event, and I would like if you could talk about you for a moment and, kind of bring us into your world as far as, where you've come from, getting you into the applicant attorney world.
Yeah, I just wanted to touch upon real quick. When we met at the San Diego board, there's a sign-in sheet. This is all before COVID, where older workers would show up and would be waiting in a large room, and the attorneys will go in to talk to the judges and come get their clients. And I noticed right around that time, 2012, within 3-year radius of that time, all the attorneys on the sign-in sheet were from Los Angeles. I'm like, what the hell? How is this happening? And I was concerned, and I started reaching out to the district attorney fraud comp fraud head at the time, and
Yeah.
started working with him because it was a real sort of invasion of out-of-town attorneys poaching the Latino workers. I I started my own practice in 1990. So gosh, 35, 36 years ago. Probably about your age when you were born, right? It was a general practice, which turned into a divorce practice because it's kind of a bread and butter practice. But my partner and wife at the time was doing workers' comp, making twice the money, working half the hours. So this is like 1990, mid 90s. I thought, I'm going to have to swallow my pride and join her as a work comp attorney. And just to give you some perspective, back in 1990, I could send my client to a doctor friend or doctor that I had confidence in, and whatever that doctor said, the insurance company pretty much had to authorize.
Oh, wow.
And 1990, for a psych case, the worker only had to show 10% causation.
Yeah.
Any person that walks into a job is going to qualify for work comp based on
Right.
that threshold. So that was one of the first reforms in 90 where they raised that to 51%. The insurance companies were going bankrupt, and that's when all the reforms started. It's one of the reasons I wasn't so interested in combating the cappers because I saw that as another reason for the insurance lobby and the insurance industry to take away more and more rights for the honest people I represent, right? Because of the abuse.
Right.
And so that's when I started reaching out to district attorney's office and doing and cooperating with them and with you, try to clean up the system. And no matter how much, it's like whack-a-mole. Or is it
Yep.
whack-a-mole or whack-a-mole? You clean one up and then another scheme comes up. Back in around that time, 2012, I was at in South Bay, which is the Latino community here in San Diego, outside of Plaza Bonita, and every single car had a little card saying, "Hey, we can get you $1,400 a month. We can get you free medical care. Call this number."
I remember those cards.
Yeah, and I, out of curiosity, called, and that year I got about 500 calls saying, "Hey, do you know anyone that's been injured, or are you injured?" And I was, "No, I'm not injured." "Well, at the end of the day, don't you have sore shoulders? Doesn't your back hurt at the end of the day?" I'm like, "Not really." So it was hardcore solicitation because and all these were going to Los Angeles, basically,
Right.
and that's where they were coming down, invading the San Diego courthouse. And so, um, yeah, it was pretty wild. Luckily, with your efforts, the San Diego system was cleaned up pretty well. So now we have local attorneys representing San Diego workers.
Did you learn, started to see this when you were coming into the practice, but when you were in law school, did they warn you about this? These
Nothing.
activities, fraud syndicates?
Law school is sort of like a citadel of learning, not really too much real world experience. This is the what happens when you get out and you start pounding the payments and dealing with real people and businesses. And so, yeah, no, the law school does not prepare you for. I mean, we have ethics class, and rules of professional conduct prevent attorneys from using cappers, but it didn't seem to stop the LA attorneys that were coming down here. So yeah, it was something I learned. It was on the job training.
Because a lot of applicant attorneys who I've spoken to, they would tell me that you wouldn't believe how pervasive the cappers are. They would be sitting in their offices, and cappers would just knock on the door and walk in, and they would start out with being friendly and saying how they could, offer services to get claims for them and offer services for their law office, and then they would start coming in, and this was in San Diego.
Yeah,
Where it's a little bit more polite, in,
yeah,
in the workers' comp system. And they would start coming in kind of like mafiosos, where they would start
yeah,
demanding that the attorney do business with them. And, if attorneys aren't learning this in law school, how
right.
does a new attorney coming out, just getting their bar card and getting into work comp, you know, how do they get that messaging and how do they protect themselves?
Well, hopefully they're officers of the court. Every attorney is an officer of the court, and hopefully they take that oath seriously, like I do. But I can tell you, greed is a powerful motivator. When one of the 8 capping agencies came in to sell the marketing scheme, and it was basically, I guess I had to give them like $5,000 a month, and they would guarantee 10 cases a month or 20 cases a month. I can't remember how many, but it was very, like you say, very aggressive marketing. I had one copy service come in my office and say, "Jack, we want your signature. Can you just?" He brought a pad, a tablet. "Just sign here your signature, and we'll use it to get every record from every file from every client, and we'll have someone come in and take care of that. Just open up your drawers, and we'll do the rest." And I'm like, "Hell no! I'm not going to give you my signature. What are you, insane?" Because without an attorney, they can't do any of that.
Right.
That's the thing.
Right.
They have to have an attorney open the doors to the castle before they can get in. And so, yeah, and they wanted to do all my independent medical review appeals. That would be a service that I got for providing them with my signature. And I'm assuming every time that they had to do an appeal, which is like almost every month now, they'd have to recopy everything because we needed to get the new stuff. So it's a perpetual money making scheme with all the copying.
Can we break that can we break that down what you were mentioning? Because it's a whole bunch of law violations that you have mentioned that they were attempting to
Yep.
conspire with you and bring you in on. The first one was providing cases for you. They wanted about $5,000 a month in exchange for providing you cases. And for people who aren't familiar in this industry and don't understand what you might be saying here, you're saying something incredibly relevant to where they're not talking about leads. They're not trying to take $5,000 from you to, bring you potential clients, who you can develop a attorney-client relationship with and decide if they have a case. What you're saying is that they're bringing you a predetermined, prepackaged case already ready to go, basically, is what you're saying, right?
They would go to people's homes. I mean, this is the phone bank. I got 500 calls in 1 year, and so that everyone else had picked up one of those cards in the parking lot. And they would go over to their homes and fill out applications. And at that point, they would distribute those to whatever attorneys were on their stable of attorneys.
Right.
So they would send the information. At the time, I don't believe these attorneys were even meeting with these clients. They just got the information from the capper and took it from there.
Right.
And that opened up a whole, because not only were the attorneys involved, but there was a couple of chiropractors in town that were involved, and a couple of the imaging facilities. I got subbed in, meaning two people hired me that had been working with one of the LA attorneys, and they both came in and they were both with the same chiropractor, and they showed me their reporting, and they were identical. The only thing different was the name of the worker. They all needed sleep studies. They all needed sex study. They all needed MRIs. They all needed CT scans. And I'm like, wow, this is kind of all set up for like an assembly line, is what it. So all you need is an attorney and a Latino client. Put it on the assembly line, and it just goes down the line with every conceivable benefit that would benefit somebody who is legitimately injured. But it seems like a lot of these cases were being fabricated, even unbeknownst to the worker. So one worker told me he was in a deposition, and the defense attorney said, "So you're having problems with sex?" And he says, "What? You can't sleep right now. I sleep like a baby." What are you talking- It- it- the workers were, I mean, a lot of times, you know, this reflects badly on the worker. I think it's important to understand that they were being used as pawns in a scheme um, by this type of criminal enterprise, if you will.
And you mentioned copy services, and whenever I talk to people outside of this industry, when we talk about different fraud types, because these are fraud syndicates who are creating fraud schemes, so it's multi-layered in their fraud link, right? And a lot of people don't understand when we say copy services, they don't understand what we're talking about. And so basically what you're saying is these are basically subpoena services, right? They're companies that supposedly are going out to get records for you. And what's so relevant about what you said is that they brought you like what, this like electronic pad where they just wanted to get your signature.
Yeah, and then they would decide what's relevant. So
So
basically, they
let's talk about
control
that because who's supposed to decide what records are needed on a work comp claim?
the one who wants to copy every single file from it since the person was born. And the copy services know what they're doing. They understand that they can copy employment records, Kaiser records, any kind of diagnostic records. So just go on down the line. They had a list. I've seen the list, and it's basically everything that could even be school records, any kind of record that could have any potential relevance in any way they were going to go after. Now, to be fair, an insurance attorney will also be copying a huge amount of records, trying to prove apportionment. So it's not just the applicant attorney that was, I don't want to say abusing the system, but how do you tell the difference between fraud and abuse, which is
Right,
criminal?
right.
I think a lot of this whole copy service thing for the attorneys, a lot of it is just not necessary. I don't get records. I get them all basically from the insurance attorney. And applicant attorneys will tell me, well, aren't you being naive? How do you know they're not hiding things? And it just seems like justification for sending out your own copy service and many times getting duplicative records. So the whole point is that each side should get relevant records to develop their case, but sort of this wide fishing expedition of everything imaginable, it seems to me is it's an abuse of the system more than maybe a criminal act. Depending on
Right.
how you do it. If you're paying somebody a bribe to allow you to get the records, then yeah, you can't do that.
I found that when I started looking at copy service companies and their services and the behavior of it all, I picked up the phone and called applicant attorneys, and who I had, who I knew would give me some honest feedback. And I would ask them, what records do you truly need? Because what I'm looking at here are like what you had just said, 20, 30, 40, 50 records. What's relevant about this, and that what a lot of people don't know, even people in the industry, is that there's one source that pays for those records, and that's the insurance company. No one else is. It's not like other lines of insurance. So in
Right.
workers' comp, the all reasonable and necessary medical and legal bills are paid by one source, the insurance carrier or the employer, if the employer is self-insured. And every applicant who I spoke to, even one who was criminally charged, who, warned me and taught me about some inside tactics of copy service companies is that normally, for the most part, applicant attorneys are looking for personnel records, insurance claim records, and relevant active
Right.
medical treating or anything that might be in the patient's history that is relevant to the claim at hand. Not all the other stuff that you're seeing from when they were, born, that sort of thing that's out of the scope.
You don't need the gynecological records or the Kaiser records from childhood. And I'll ask them, did you treat for this injury at Kaiser? No, I didn't. Okay, well, then I don't need that. But if you give that decision to a copy service, they will get that unnecessary, unneeded record just
Yeah.
because. And that's not, I don't think that's good enough. And I think that that's one of the reasons I think there was some guidelines now for copy services, and you have to first try to get them from the insurance and all that stuff.
Right. That 30-day rule. I think when you're talking about fraud and copy service, like you said, there's this abuse and then there's fraud and then there's that line. Yeah. And I think, what they're trying to state is that the attorney requested these records and we're billing you because the attorney requested the records. So I think the fraud is in did that attorney truly request those records or not?
Right. But I agree with you.
Mhm.
And how do you prove it?
Right.
The attorney would basically have to admit that he sold his, or I don't know about sold, but he gave away his signature
Right.
to a copy service person.
Right.
And I don't know that you're going to get much cooperation because it's almost admitting that you're part of the problem. And
That's interesting. Yeah.
when I approach attorneys asking them to denounce the fraud, the cappers, most of the time, no, I don't want to get in trouble. I don't want to get sued. I'm too
Right.
busy. So they turn a blind eye, which I can't do because it's going to come back to bite us in the butt once the next wave of reforms comes in.
I think my other concern is I'm always thinking of the victims, whether it's an applicant attorney in this to where maybe they stole the applicant attorney's signature and they're benefiting off of, creating their own referrals for business at the detriment of the applicant attorney. But there's also this other victim here is that it's the patient. It's the client where these copy services don't just go and get records. When those records become data sources at some point, that the patient or your client's personal information now becomes this data source
Yeah.
that can be sold off down the road. And I believe that that happens because some copy services send out the records overseas to Pakistan or India.
When I became a member of this capper agency, right? They sent me my little card, my membership card. Once when they got busted, eventually I think they got broken up. And then about a couple of years later, I got a call from someone wanting to sell me a car. And it was the same phone number. It was like the same background noise for the call center. So now it was, do you need help applying for Social Security? And so, yeah, it's
Yeah.
once you get that list of names and numbers, then it could be handed out, bought, sold, or whatever. So yeah, it's that's life in the big city, I guess.
And you're kind of talking about another underlying issue. And when we talk about work comp fraud, we ask, why, in California, why it's so relevant. And why workers' comp, and because workers' comp is the predicate to other sources of benefits. And I know you have some thoughts about SIBTF and talking about copy services and getting all these records kind of is a
Uh,
nice transition into the discussion of SIBTF if
oh
you
my
want to
gosh.
go into that.
Yeah, that's got an interesting story, specifically about the records. And just so your viewers, listeners know, Subsequent Injuries Benefits Trust Fund, SIBTF, is a system in the state of California where it's trying to encourage employers to hire disabled workers. And basically, they tell the employer, look, if you hire someone with a disability and they get injured, we will cover any part of the injury that was due to that prior injury. You only have to worry about the subsequent injury that happened at your shop. And if there's combined, this person can no longer work, the state of California will cover that. So it's a good concept. But the problem with the SIBTF cases is that you don't have to do the state QME list. An attorney can go to any doctor in the state of California and have them do a SIBTF report. And so we now have about 20, maybe 30 agencies with stable of doctors soliciting attorneys, hey, let us do your reports for SIBTF. You don't have to get a panel from the state. You can use us and we'll take care of it. So
And then you're saying report, not evaluation, right?
evaluation and report.
So they'll physically evaluate your client?
They will. I had one SIBTF agency solicit me, and I said, "Okay, I'm willing to try you out. You were referred by a friend." They wrote the report, and the doctor, this gal had two neck injuries, the prior neck injury, and then another neck injury, and then she was pretty messed up after that second injury. The doctor, a chiropractor, said, "Oh wow, if you combine those two injuries, she's at 140% disability. All I need is 100%. So I'm good." But he also said, but you know what? Why don't we get a psych report, an internal report? She's having trouble hearing. Let's get a an ear doctor report. I'm like, why? And I realized that's because they can make more money. Because all these other doctors that the attorney didn't need, the agency is soliciting for more of the doctors in their stable. And it gets even worse. I get an email saying, hey, we ordered um, 20, well, about 10 facilities, and we ordered that for you. I'm like, I didn't ask you to do that. What are you doing? So I don't even know how they got. I mean, you have to have a subpoena. I don't even know how they managed to. I guess they forged my signature. I don't know how they did it.
Wow.
And I said no, I don't need this. And I sent my response to the administrative director, and so you know they apologized profusely. But I'm one of the few attorneys that would actually call them on it.
Right.
Most, oh yeah, do whatever you want. Get all these other records and reports and turn this into a mushroom cloud of unnecessary um, development of the record when it's completely unnecessary.
Can you talk about the relationship between SIBTF and workers' comp?
Well, that SIBTF is part of the work comp system. And normally that subsequent injury benefits trust fund, that subsequent injury is a work injury.
Right.
So it already has the work comp attorney on it. And then you can go back and combine that subsequent injury, that second injury, with any industrial or non-industrial disability that person had to try to get to the threshold. It's going to be over 70%. So sometimes, yeah, you do need to dig deep into all kinds of internal medicine problems and God knows what else there could be. But when you're at 100, which is all that you need, that's totally unnecessary. I had another one of these agencies email me saying, "Hey, I heard you settled this particular case recently. Can we do the BTF workup on that?" I'm like, "No, this gal is working. She's back at work full duty." "Oh, that's okay. We'll get her through all our doctors, and we'll be sure to qualify her." And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. I wish I would have saved that email, but I just deleted it. But that's what happens when there's an open door to the checkbook of the work comp carrier. And in this case, it's the state. It's not
Right.
even the work comp. The state pays for all these reports.
Right.
And so it's a mess. And there was some legislation this year trying to get rid of these agencies and have the parties use the QME process. You ask the state, you get a list of three doctors, and potentially even have the judges get involved in whether or not these specialties are necessary, in fact necessary, versus the fox watching the chicken and the agency of the doctors deciding what's necessary. It's all necessary. In fact, we have stuff that's necessary that's not even necessary. Comprehensive reform. This is kind of a piecemeal kind of thing.
Okay.
So hopefully, maybe next year something will come up because the workers are going to lose this benefit
Yeah.
because it's just, there's no unlimited funding in the state
Right.
to cover all this.
What is more lucrative, and does one thing lead to the other, like with the SIBTF? If a claimant, a person doesn't have a work comp claim, but the attorney wants to file an SIBTF claim. Do you see this feeding into, a fraud system
Well, you have
by
to have,
fraud
well,
significance?
I guess you could say no taking no surety. If you don't have a work comp claim, you don't have a subsequent
Mhm.
claim. So that's part of the requirement. I don't know that that would make cappers more aggressive as far as trying. They're going to do everything they can to get as many leads as they can.
Right.
I don't know that they're looking that far downstream, but once the underlying case settles, that's when the attorney has to file the subsequent injuries case, and that's when hell breaks loose because that's when all the doctors want to. In fact, they advertised at the attorney conventions, and one of the banners had to be taken down because it was like this is the new moneymaker. The the convention, I guess, the planners went in and no, you need to take this down. I mean, this is not good. You're giving us a black eye because,
Right.
and that's the difference. I think the people involved in the abuse are seeing this as a business,
Yeah.
a money making business versus seeking justice for their clients. And if you're a good attorney and you do a good job, clients will come and you'll be able to pay the rent. You don't need to pad the cases with this kind of fabrication and abuse. It was like, go
Can
ahead.
applicant attorneys get by without being involved in these fraud schemes, capping the solicitation? Can an applicant attorney do their own marketing or be successful
Well,
without falling to these schemes?
I don't do marketing. I
Yeah.
have people knocking down my door trying to get me to sign them up as clients. It got to the point where I'm turning away. I'm referring cases out because I'm swamped. I'm too. And I've been doing this for 35 years.
Right.
If a new attorney came on the scene, they're trying to build up their practice, so it's tempting to use shortcuts and live on the edge. But I think it'll come back to haunt you if you're.
Right. What would you say to these young attorneys still in law school or going for their bar card and are going to walk into this work comp world? What would you have wanted to have been told, when you were there about these fraud syndicates?
It's interesting because when these people come into the office, they don't look like criminals. They look like honest businessmen. They're very polished, and in some ways, they're con men. So someone that's not experienced, doesn't know the way the system works, could get easily duped into thinking, oh, wow, this is a great thing. This guy's going to do all my copying. He's going to do all my IMR reviews.
Right.
And all I have to do is allow him.
Right.
And so, the old saying, if it sounds too good to be true, it's probably because it's not true. And, just avoid the shortcuts, and your reputation in the community is what's going to get you through your career. And it's not worth it to taint that with these types of schemes, which they may work, but it's an abuse of the system and it harms the system more than it helps your client, because in the end, your client is the one that's going to lose more benefits due to more reform because it's out of control.
Right. There's a lot of billboards out there with attorney advertising. There's a lot of commercials on TV, call this phone number, we'll help you. We can get you this much money. It was funny. Someone asked me one time, how do we know? How do we know this is a good attorney? How do we know, who to call? Like, how does someone know if they're at home right now
Yeah.
and they have an injury from work? Where do they go? What do they do if they do need an attorney?
That's a really good question. And first of all, stay with a San Diego attorney. You don't need to go out of county to find a good attorney. The California Applicants Attorney Association webpage has a list of attorneys that they go to conventions, they're educated. They're part of this group that is dedicated to helping workers. So that's you can put in your zip code and you'll get every attorney that in that organization that's near your home. The
Right.
San Diego County Bar Association, each county, I'm sure, has a bar association with reputable attorneys for every specialty. So it's not just work comp. So
Right.
I would, I mean, I guess the best way to do it is word of mouth, although sometimes, That could be somewhat misleading, but the San Diego County Bar Association and the COB webpage, I think, are the safest way to find someone that's legitimate. No guarantees. I think that's better than Googling.
I've talked to some people and they Googled, what should I do? And, they
Yeah.
get caught up in the fraud scheme. So yeah, that's a really good point. And what does a good relationship look like? Because I've talked to a lot of these people, I've found the cappers and I've followed cappers and I spoke to their victims, the people who they preyed upon. And cappers make all these promises. They get into the people's homes and
Right.
now it's in social media and they make all these promises. How does someone know that they're with a good attorney versus
Well,
someone in this fraud scheme?
they actually meet them.
Okay.
In the fraud schemes, you never meet the attorney. In many ways, he's not even in your county. And especially now with Zoom and the court call where everything's done virtually,
Right.
I think a good sign is did you actually were you in the room with this person that's going to represent you in this difficult time in your life?
Right.
Can you access them? Can you call them and get in touch with them? And many times I hear I can never. I've never spoken to my attorney.
Right.
And I speak to the receptionist and I get transferred to the secretary. And if I'm lucky, I'll talk to the paralegal. But I met the attorney at the depot or I
Right.
met the attorney at trial. And that's when they wanted me to do a quick settlement for 5,000 and be done with it when they
Yep.
originally had said 50 or 100,000. So, yeah, some people get duped and they sign the settlement. I think I told you a story. I represented a really nice gal who had Orange County, LA attorney. And she said they were at the courthouse on the day of the mandatory settlement conference. And he said, okay, we need to talk. Let's go out in the parking lot. And every time they needed to talk, he would not talk to her where there would be witnesses or anyone that could hear all the BS that he was feeding her. And she settled a pretty good case for about 10 cents on the dollar because the whole system was to put him on the assembly line. And once all the testing had been done and all the subpoenas and copy services have been done, get him out, get a new one in. And so and that's why I feel strongly about fighting the abuse because it's hurting the workers. It's hurting the people that are supposed to be benefiting from the system. And and the first time that 1998 maybe that I realized there was a problem. I had a compromise and release, and that's a settlement where the case closes. It was a pretty mild back injury. I think my client got $10,000 and the chiropractor got $80,000. Like, wait a minute, what's going on here? How is this possible? The person injured gets 10 grand and then the chiropractor gets 80 grand. And that was before the 24 caps. But that's a good example. Now, injured workers cannot go to a chiropractor more than 24 times because of that type of abuse.
Yeah.
So it's whenever um, it's kind of like I don't know, almost like a pendulum. When it starts swinging one too far one way, the pressure will go back to bring it back. And
Always.
the idea would be to kind of have some kind of middle ground where everyone can make a living, but not to the point where you're over. I don't know how to say it. You're abusing the system to try to make more than what the case is worth, or something like to that effect.
Yeah, absolutely. And what would you say about the type of employee that these fraud syndicates are going after?
It's the unsophisticated Latino worker, the dishwasher, the housekeeper, maybe undocumented, someone who's not going to complain. Go to
Okay.
this place and do your MRI. Go to this place and do your CT scan. Go to this place and do your sleep study. And I just,
Mhm.
okay, I'll show up. In fact,
Yeah.
probably even get a ride from the doctor's office. But it's basically uneducated, unsophisticated clients that will not complain, will not expect more than what their attorney is telling them they should be getting. And they unfortunately many of them trust the attorney and
Trusting.
uh,
Yep.
And that's that good. I had one interpreter tell me the client was questioning her about a low bowl settlement, and the interpreter went to the LA attorney and says, "Well, he's kind of not happy with this." And the LA attorney said, "Screw him. He's just a stupid Mexican. Just have him sign it." And I'm like,
Oh,
"Okay,"
that kills me.
you know.
Ugh.
That's where you take the gloves off and you start going after these people because they don't have El Pueblo in mind. They don't have the community in mind. They
Right.
just have their own pocketbook in mind, and that's that part.
No, I was talking to this. I was investigating a clinic in San Diego, and one applicant attorney said, "Hey, do you want to talk to my client? He was wrapped up into one of these fraud schemes, and he's got a few things to say." And I said, "Sure." So I met with him. Really nice guy. He lives in Tijuana, Mexico, just south of the border from San Diego. And he would tell me about what they put him through. And one of the things that he would have to do is he would have to drive from his home to the border, south of the border,
Mhm.
try to find a place to park his car, which everybody knows if you've been in Tijuana, there's no good places to leave your car, you know, on the Mexico side. I've been there a
Yeah,
million times. He would, so it would basically take an hour from his house to south of the border, find a place to park his car. Then he had to walk across the border, which we all know is not fun. Usually there's long lines, especially if you don't have Sentry. So it would probably take another anywhere from 30 minutes to another hour just to walk across the border, then jump on a trolley, take the trolley to the medical clinic. And he would have to wait for another hour in the heat outside because the clinic was so small. The
yeah,
people had to wait outside. San Diego gets hot, it's
yeah,
104, 109 degrees heat. And then he would go for a 15-minute acupuncture session.
yeah.
And that was it. And then he would go, he'd
Tomorrow.
have to take the trolley, go back over the border. I mean, this turned into like a 4-hour event 3 days a week for this guy for a 15-minute acupuncture session that it wasn't even helping. Like the acupuncturist wasn't even doing the right thing and treating the
Yeah,
right body parts and that sort of thing. So that's a whole nother issue, right?
yeah,
And I asked him, I said, "Well, why did you do it?" He said, "Because they told me I had to."
yeah.
It's like they hold the settlement over their heads like a
Mhm.
carrot and say, "Hey, we're going to get you $50,000." And that's kind of like what the amount that they like to promise is the
Yeah,
$15,000, like
yeah.
or
The going
50, sorry,
rate.
$50,000. Just keep going to this acupuncturist, keep spending 4 hours, 3 times a week. I mean, this guy was worn out just trying to go to this acupuncture session.
And they probably didn't tell him that he can get mileage for that. So
No, because how is that gonna benefit them,
exactly.
you know? I mean, they're so it's so pervasive. Then the question I wanted to ask you, because it all starts here, right? It's systemic. What would you tell employers, these businesses, especially we've got some small businesses out there that just might have a handful of employees and these fraud syndicates, I try to tell everyone who will listen is that they're coming for your employees. They want to get all of them. They don't care about shutting you down.
Yeah,
They want to grab all your employees. They get one and then they get another and they get another. They ask for more information. They want to sign up their families. And cappers would tell me that, directly
yeah,
is that
for
we
sure.
want everybody because we get paid per head. They get paid anywhere from $50 to $75 to $150 to sign these people up and they have to make sure it becomes a claim.
Yeah,
So then who's housing these cash crops for these cappers are businesses, right? So what would you tell
yeah. That's a
these
really good
businesses in
question.
Sandy?
Yeah, I think basically treat your people right. If you communicate with your employees as to how the system works and kind of in a sense help them process their claim, they will have no need to
Right.
go to somewhere else. And I got a call from an employer a few months back who said, "Well, my worker got injured, and she wants me to fill out the form and give her the insurance information, but I don't have insurance. So what do I do? I think you probably should tell her that you don't have insurance and maybe either settle out or deal with." Eventually an attorney. But no, I don't want to tell her. I've been putting it off. She keeps emailing me. That's a recipe for disaster.
Mhm.
He could have potential. Okay, I'll handle your medical expenses. I'll keep you on the payroll. Let's work together to get this solved. But just trying to cover his butt, he got himself into deeper and deeper trouble, and he resisted. "No, I just don't feel comfortable telling her," and you're just in denial. You're trying to deflect the inevitable disaster because now she's got an attorney, now she doesn't trust you because you won't give her the information, and that's basically it. If they complain, "Do you need medical care?" "We'll send you to Concentra." They're gonna say you have nothing wrong with you anyway, so why not? "Here's the claim form. We'll report it." But when you start trying to sweep it under the rug, then you're basically telling them you need to hire an attorney. And
Right.
and and people with attorneys will get 2 or 3 or 4 times more benefit than pro pers. And even potentially call the adjuster and say, "Hey, what's going on? Is she getting better or is he getting better? Can I do anything to help?" Be involved,
Right. Absolutely.
not see it so much as an adversarial, right?
Yep.
Because anything now, "Oh, wow, they're the enemy." And then they go off into, "Oh, they're probably a fraud," and all this nonsense. And it doesn't have to be like that.
Right. Absolutely. I'd like to see if you would share a little bit about you. My first thing I have to know is you still doing Jersey Mike's?
I am, on occasion, although California Fish Fry is now my hangout.
Where's that located?
Mission Valley, pretty close to the office. Yeah, yeah, I really enjoy working with you. I'm kinda bummed that you retired and now are turning into a podcast star, but if you ever go back to fighting, getting back in the trenches, I remember talking to you when you were like behind a car filming some guy coming out of some house. "Jack, I can't talk loud because I gotta hold the camera straight."
I
You
think
might
that was
even
this
had your dog with you or something.
I was gonna mention that. Yeah, I have a few golden retriever, golden lab mixes, and one of them, she just always wants to get out on the road with me all the
Yeah.
time. And I actually had 2 with me. One of them's really quiet, and one of them's very talkative. They're both from Tijuana, by the way, you
Oh,
know?
nice.
And I was on one of the fraud syndicates. I had parked my car in another parking lot over behind a fence, and I made a mistake of rolling down my windows so that they could see outside and
Yeah.
see what mommy's doing, right? So I'm walking up to the fence and I'm trying to look through to see what the fraudsters are doing, and she just starts barking at me, talking to me, and I'm
Oh
like,
my
"Oh my
god.
god,
There
everybody's
you
looking
go.
at me."
That's a good way to stay undercover.
Well, I know that after this, you might think of some more things. The whole point is really to get the word out because these fraud syndicates operate in obscurity and in the darkness. And I'm just so blown away after all these years of me doing public speaking, you doing what you're doing, a lot of people trying to get the word out. Still to this day, people don't understand what's happening with these schemes. What does it mean like when there's something in front of your desk and you think capping occurs? People don't truly understand what is capping and what it looks like on the street. They don't understand that, that fraud claim went through all this other stuff on the street to get in
Yep.
front of you. And then, I try to remind people there are two different issues. There's either the singular fraud, linear, where it's the claimant driving the fraud, and maybe it's a fraudster claimant,
Right.
or maybe it's not a fraudster claimant and there's a fraud scheme behind it making it look like there's a fraudster claimant. It's like who's driving the fraud. So I want to do everything I can. That's the whole reason why I created this podcast and bring in really great subject matter experts is this is the way to get the messaging out now, you know?
Yeah, it's the work comp system is broken in many ways due to the reforms that have tried to combat all the abuse. And it's to the point where I had a client who had carpal tunnel surgery, and the doctor requested a sling, and that was denied. It cost them about $400 to deny a sling that could be like 10 bucks, 20
Right.
bucks. So it's again, the pendulum keeps swinging back to the other. And I think we all need to work towards a middle ground where everyone's doing their job without, you know, trying to get more than the case is worth, or trying to prevent the worker from getting necessary care just because they're afraid that it could be fraudulent. It really shouldn't. It's unfortunate, but it really shouldn't be like the first thing that someone thinks of. They got hurt at work, it's probably a fraud. You know, after 20 years, that's what comes to mind with many adjusters and defense attorneys and employers. And it doesn't have to be like that.
You mentioned you are denied. Can you talk briefly about that? Because we're using terms that might not be familiar to
Yeah.
others.
Basically, when I started, I mentioned I could send my client to a doctor that I knew, and pretty much everything that doctor requested had to be approved, and that led to the $80,000 chiropractor payment when the client was only getting 10,000. And that was being abused. And a lot of doctors were requesting unnecessary care. I don't know if you remember manipulation under anesthesia. Remember
Mm.
that? The chiropractors, well, how can I make a $150 appointment cost 1,500? Oh, I can uh, give the client anesthesia, and I'll have an anesthesiologist, and then I can manipulate them as they sleep. So there was a lot of unnecessary, in my mind, um, practices getting done. And so um, there was a reform where now I cannot send my client to a doctor that I think is going to treat him right. I have to find a doctor in the insurance network. Each insurance company has a network. Some are better than others. And that my client goes to their doctor. And
Mhm.
whatever that doctor requests goes to UR, utilization review, which is another insurance doctor looking over what was requested and deciding if it's necessary or not. If they deny it, I get to appeal that to another insurance doctor, and they are denying 90% of the appeal. So if you don't get it from the get-go, it's probably not going to happen.
And is that patient not getting the treatment that they're supposed to get when all this is happening, or they are getting treated?
Well, they're getting some treatment,
Mm.
but my favorite utilization review story was a gentleman probably in his 50s. He needed a total hip replacement. Utilization review said, no, you don't. And you can, a denial is good for a year, unless there's a change in circumstance. So about a few months later, he was using a cane. And the doctor said, okay, now he's worse. There's a change. He does need this hip replacement. Utilization review doctor said, no, no, you don't. A few months later, he was using a walker. And the doctor said, oh, look, now he can't even with the cane, he can't get around. He's using a walker. He needs the total knee replacement, okay? No, you don't. Eventually, he was on a wheelchair, and they approved it was a total hip replacement. They approved the hip replacement, and within a month, he died of cancer.
Oh.
So after waiting for 2 years, basically, to get his hip replacement, he never was able to walk right because it was just it's a cost utilization review is a cost cutting um, practice, just like the pendulum swung far to the left with all the unnecessary treatments. Now it's swung the other way, where necessary treatment is being denied. I got a call last Saturday night from a client who had a total lung transplant. I didn't get my medicine. My body's rejecting the lungs. I'm like, oh my God, this isn't right. Go to the ER. Well, it's supposed to be comp. They will give me 1 out of the 5 I need. And that's why, if you see the forest for the trees and you understand that if you do this right, then you don't need these extreme measures to try to combat the abuse because injured workers in California should be getting necessary care. And there was a Patterson decision about a couple of years ago, which said once the insurance company authorizes like home health care or anti rejection medication for a transplant, they cannot deny it anymore unless the insurance company shows there's a change in circumstance. And oh my God, that's like the most welcoming change because now we could have some consistency in medical care. Not like 1 month you get your pain pills, the next month you don't, and you get half, and then you won't get any, and then you get double. You can't practice medicine like that. The Patterson case was struck down, so now we're back to every month, even if the guy has been in a inpatient home for 10 years, every month the doctor has to re-request it. And eventually you're going to find a utilization review doctor saying, oh, wow, I'm going to look great by denying this. They're going to love me. But then you're putting a severely disabled worker on the streets or back in his home with inadequate treatment.
Right.
Moral of the story is if you do this right, then you don't have to go to those extremes because one extreme will bring another extreme. And
Yeah.
nothing that's extreme is going to be consistent or something that you can do for a long term because it's just not meant to be like that. And I
Right.
think the work you're doing is helping us get to that point or at least closer to that point. But it's important. I'm hoping that in your future podcast, you bring people together and not, point fingers, but, shake hands.
Yeah, absolutely, not adversarial.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Only working together can we work and become a stronger nation and a stronger system in World War Comp.
Yeah, and, I just thought of one more thing about, you were talking about, the Latino, Hispanic, community and being victimized by these fraud syndicates. It's one very lucrative form of fraud. It's the interpreting agency billing, for interpreting services. And I wanted to ask you, I mean, we're in California, and especially in Southern California and San Diego, where, I mean, where are we now as far as the Latino population, right? I think, well, they say it was close to 51% at this point for
Something like
population. Um, the one of the largest billers on a workers' compensation claim is the interpreting agency interpreting billing, and so they bill for services, legal services, but also medical services as well.
that.
Now, what have you seen out there, with these law offices where everybody's speaking Spanish in the law office, but
Right.
there's interpreting bills, or the medical clinics, everybody's speaking Spanish in the medical clinic, and then there's interpreting bills. What would you say about that?
Well, a couple of things. I speak Spanish, and so I don't need an interpreter most of the time. I mean, when clients are in my office, I speak Spanish to them. Once we went virtual, it used to be the clients were all in a courthouse, right? They were in that big giant room, and maybe you'd have a settlement ready, or maybe the judge wanted to talk to them. They were in that room. So during those cases, when there was a monolingual Spanish speaker, the attorneys had an interpreter on site in
Right.
case there was an issue or the settlement had to be read to them. When COVID hit and we went virtual, the clients weren't there. It was just the attorney on the phone or on the webcam talking to the judge. And the interpreter that I was using asked me to, hey, can I participate? Why? The client's not there. Oh, well, maybe, you'll have to call him. Yeah, but I speak Spanish. So to me, that was an abuse of the system. You're being paid couple $100 for nothing,
Yeah.
because there's no one there. And I these days, every now and then I will see an attorney and an interpreter on court call on the webpage. Okay, if the attorney doesn't speak Spanish, okay, maybe, but
Right.
it seemed like if the client's not there, well, then why would you need the interpreter, right? Now,
The last thing I'd like to hit you with is, in my industry, women are still, struggling, to get recognition, just to be seen and heard. Do you have any examples of when you might be able to highlight something that a woman has done?
you know, I'm on the education committee for the California Applicant Attorney Association, and also the chair of the San Diego County Bar Association. So I put on educational programs every so often. And the most popular program I put on in San Diego is the judges panel, when judges will get on kind of what we're doing now. In fact, we
Uh-huh.
had one yesterday where the judges get on and they, okay, you guys, this is what's happening at the board. These are the problem areas. This is what we need you guys to do. These are the latest cases. And the two judges who are head and shoulders above all the other judges are two women who I can depend on, and whatever I ask them, yes, Jack, we'll be happy to do it. We want to serve the community. And I don't know. I mean, there's plenty of men judges, but nothing. They're busy. I don't know what they're watching football games or what they're doing. But it's these two judges that and I I'm a firm believer that sometimes the best man for the job is a woman. I think they're more sensible. They're not as I mean, this I think one of the issues. Oh, the women are too emotional, but no, it's the other way around. It's usually the men that are hot-headed and stubborn and not willing to listen to reason. I had to change my practice, and this is something else I would suggest for people that want to do what I'm doing, is you have to stay professional, and you can't let people get under your skin. Because I've had several male attorneys, a couple of female attorneys, but mainly male attorneys who are very condescending.
Mm,
with my Latino clients. They speak to them in a condescending way, they try to humiliate them, almost insulting them, and that was getting me riled up.
yeah, absolutely.
I'm like, I have a son that wants to go to graduate school. I can't stroke out because some, um, you know, young attorney wants to put a notch in his belt.
Right.
And I used to get really riled up, and then I said, I don't wanna stroke out." So I started taking Tai Chi and meditating and then praying, doing all kinds of spiritual things, and that transformed the way I was handling that. So now when one of these attorneys insults my client, I speak to their better half. I speak to their better angel, say, "Dude, you don't need to be insulting, you know." And that has actually worked. But it's there's a couple of gals that get me going pretty hard, but it's usually the males that seem to have more to prove, and so, uh, I much prefer working with female attorneys because I think they're easier to get along with.
Very nice.
That would be just me. And look at you, you're getting into a to blow this podcast up and going virtual.
Well, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you very much, your time, and I hope that you would continue to contribute. And just, I really appreciate you, Jack.